I've heard you say a couple of things today. I like this idea of find your wasta. I think in the early days, and even now, I'm like, we're starting in Saudi, or we started in Saudi. So I'm trying to build my network very deep, but you vocalized it in a way that I hadn't thought about it. But find your wasta, focus on the next milestone. Don't get distracted or let the end journey be daunting. This idea of being confident that you know your space, and not getting too hung up on what investors say in the early days. I like this idea of ask for quick responses from your support team. They probably have a lot of good ideas. Thanks for joining another episode of Talks with T. Joined today by Mark Chahwan, founder of Sarwa, co-founder of Sarwa. What is Sarwa?
Sarwa is an investment platform, basically, that helps you invest into the stock market in a very easy way that's not complicated, without a high minimum or high fees. So we've made basically investing, which was something that was intimidating for a lot of people, easy so that they can put their money to work. So they invest in stocks, ETFs, even crypto, so that instead of having your money lose out to inflation, you're able to participate and invest the same way high net worth individuals have been doing for so long.
Awesome. And Sarwa means revolution, right?
That's
Sarwa.
No, that's the Thawra.
Thawra. Okay, it shows you the level of my Arabic.
No, so but I love the parallel, to be fair.
Yeah, this whole time I thought you were starting the financial revolution of the Middle East, and so I was like, what a great name. He just took Thawra and turned it into the way a Lebanese person would say it, and Sarwa is born.
No, we've stayed out of politics, but we enjoyed that parallel. It means fortune, actually, or wealth. Okay. So we kept it simple.
You took the more optimistic, the positive connotation.
Yeah.
We were just talking before we started recording about how you ended up here in Dubai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was saying, basically, I grew up in Montreal, but I'm originally Lebanese. So after a few years of working in consulting and finance, it was more of an inwards journey. Actually, I started asking myself, what are some of the areas that I'm passionate about? What's a project I would like to dedicate a couple of years, if not a decade, working on? And it was about technology and finance, and building something that would benefit or scratch my itch, or would benefit my friends and family. So it led to investing and wanting to be closer to my parents and back home. That started to look at what are some of the areas where a lot of young people are moving and making money in a tax-free environment. So it started more as an idea, and the more we looked at it, it started to shape up.
Where did this itch come from?
To go back, you mean to the Middle East, or entrepreneurship?
To start something.
Yeah, I think I've always had it. As a kid, I was really inclined toward whether it's movies, stories, or the type of people I looked up to. I knew eventually it was something that I wanted to get into. It was just not sure when and what was on what I would be working on. So that took me until after a few years of working to realize you're never really ready. You have to take a leap of faith. So until I realized a lot of people are actually winging it or learning on the go. Once I figured that out in consulting, I felt, all right, my salary is only going to go one way, and it's going to be more difficult to make the jump. So let's start as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's one thing that's a recurring theme, interestingly, is many entrepreneurs I've spoken to, and they've said, I kind of always had it in me. And so it's made me reflect on, I wonder if we're all born with this desire to create, build.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along our growing up journey, whether it's school or adults maybe, beating that out of us, that you have the ability and you're not ready. And so coming to this realization that you're never ready, I think is quite a liberating viewpoint, because it provides a perspective that anyone can just start.
Yeah. Another thing I read yesterday that I liked, it was more of a title of an article that said, immigrants are entrepreneurs. And the case they were trying to make, in the summary at least, is that when you move to a new country, you're an entrepreneur. You're figuring out a lot of a different environment, and adapting to it. So I feel like there's an overlap there where a lot of us were shaped to adapt to a new country, and that builds up a certain DNA that you're much more prone or ready to do it again.
Yeah, fair. Probably one of the foundational elements of being an entrepreneur is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so when you're an immigrant or you move to a new country, I think it's easier to relate to that feeling when you're a kid. And you know, that first day of school, that feeling in your stomach the day before school starts, you know, the new school year. It's that same feeling when you move to a new country where the air smells different, or the bed you're sleeping in doesn't feel like home. So you get ingrained with this, learn how to adapt. You're feeling uncomfortable. It's okay. You'll find a way.
Until today, actually, yeah.
And I picked up on something which you didn't say, so I could be wrong here when we were talking. It seems like your mom had a profound impact on you.
Yeah, big time. My mom likes to joke that she was studying the first mutual funds course in Canada when she was pregnant with me, and that's why now
she passed it to the umbilical cord.
So the V2 of mutual funds are ETFs, and what Sarwa focuses a lot on. But yeah, she had a huge impact from just us being really close, watching her in her career as a banker, and the impact she's had to a lot of people around us. And also, whenever I brought the idea of I want to look into this, I want to explore launching Sarwa, I think it can help a lot of people. She started introducing me to one person that lived in Dubai, actually, and he invited me for the first time to visit Dubai, and he actually introduced me to a couple of people. They were in private equity, so this was way too early for them. But she participated in trying to make the idea more, just pushing it one step further, so that it can become something
nice.
What it is today. Yeah.
Nice. So she nurtured your thoughts and your desire to go out and do something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And we were talking about how luck, to a certain extent, plays a role in the story, right? With Accenture and
yeah, exactly. I think for me it was not that I'm believe in a lot of forces or anything, but when I was at Accenture exploring Sarwa and moving to Dubai, Accenture Dubai partnered with the DIFC that was launching the first fintech accelerator. So that again made it lucky in the sense that I had a contact to reach out to the person managing the accelerator, and they were looking only at post-revenue companies. We weren't even a company.
Yeah. So just an idea.
Yeah, exactly. So that helped in the sense of obviously a lot of, if you don't know as a listener, like the word wasta, you need some sort of wasta in the entrepreneurial journey to kind of get through unofficial channels as well. So having that luck and more validation that fintech is about to become something big in the Middle East was really, really good as a way to make the leap. And I've seen it's sometimes very difficult in the early days to know what is the first milestone that you need to reach. What is success versus leave it? It can be super overwhelming to have an indefinite journey, right? So for us, when I started speaking to Jad, my first co-founder, we defined success as getting into that accelerator, because getting into that accelerator means instead of having millions of dollars as regulatory capital, they were saying we would lower that to $10,000. So immediately the idea of us at 25 years old raising $10,000 isn't so impossible anymore. And so defining the success as how can we get into that accelerator was the first milestone. And then it was like, all right, we got into this accelerator, time to go to Dubai. And we started defining the next step after, which is, can we get a license to do what we wanted to do? So it was almost like in 3-month chunks to just make sure that doesn't get too overwhelming in the early days.
Yeah. What's your co-founder journey?
So Jad has been is the first one that joined me, and he's been my best friend since we were 10 years old.
Okay.
So a classmate, and he also went to McGill. So he was in Lebanon. I went to Montreal first. Then he joined in McGill. He studied software engineering, and he was working at a high-speed hedge fund actually in parallel. And he was thinking of doing something completely different.
Yeah.
I convinced him
otherwise.
I convinced him otherwise, and he was very sold from the beginning actually. And after as soon as we moved to Dubai, then we realized, all right, fintech and regulation is a beast on its own. So if he's spending time developing it and I'm spending time on regulation, we need someone to help us market this thing.
Yeah.
And we knew Nadine, who was a sister of a very close friend, and she had helped us for free while we were still in Montreal working on the website, because we didn't want the website to look like we completely missed what Dubai was about. So we had sent her, hey, this is the brand. Can you give us some tips on just not look like we're completely off in terms of what the culture, the colors, the buildings. And she helped us. She sent us like this super long email around, this is what you need to know about Dubai, and by segment.
Basically shot on your initial idea in a nice way.
Exactly. And then we worked with her for a few weeks to see if we would be a good fit, because we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And initially we didn't know we would team up as a co-founding team, but it became very clear that the three of us would work really well together.
So it sounds like you and Jad from the beginning were kind of in this, and then Nadine joined along the journey. A lot of discussions we have on the podcast revolve around solopreneur versus founding team. So how do you go about having that conversation with someone like Nadine? And how do you identify that someone like Nadine is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, for us, it was really based on what we needed at the time. The awareness came from understanding that to do it justice, we need someone really leading on marketing and building a brand. And to not have a co-founder do that would be maybe not giving it enough importance. So that was a bit of the first trigger. The CTO, I think, is everyone agree. Well, not, I would say most people agree that you need a technical co-founder.
Yeah.
And I've seen like you get so much more agility and skin in the game from that than an outsourced tech function. I think some VCs even don't invest if you don't have a technical founder.
Yeah.
Everything beyond that, I think, is people have you have more COOs, CMOs, and I've seen so many different versions of it. But on our end, we knew that we needed to build a strong financial brand. So that's how we went about it.
Yeah, this amazing foresight to have to be able to say that, to be successful on the B2C fintech side, we need a strong brand from the get-go. So that's pretty amazing foresight from you guys. So you guys, to a certain extent, when I think about it, are like the two forefathers and foremother of the DIFC regulation. I mean, I remember we were talking about doing stuff around 2015 in kind of the fintech space and getting regulated, and it was too daunting. We're like, screw it. It's like trying to push a boulder uphill, but you guys kind of took it head on.
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as the thing is, when we moved, we had a lot of urgency to just we really wanted to know, is this possible or not? And what this accelerator did, there were a few people that ultimately needed to show that Dubai can become a fintech hub. So that's why I mentioned luck as well, is because the timing was right in the sense that you needed an ally, which was the DIFC in this case, and in Raja that we spoke about earlier was someone that wanted to see change happen. So she was a very strong ally, and the regulator also wanted a win to be able to say we can regulate technology. And in that sense, the first few months were completely about a lot of these meetings and just figuring out all of the loopholes in the system to be regulated as a fintech.
Yeah. And how do you, because to a certain extent, I mean, the philosophy we've had as co-founders at Bayzat was to almost avoid or sidestep situations where our destiny or our future is out of our control and can't be determined by anyone, because we got burnt early in the insurance space and we were relying on partners that didn't pan out. So we took that approach. And so in your case, you worked very closely with an entity who, in this case, the DIFC, who could determine the future viability of the business. So how did you avoid or manage the potential to get discouraged or lose faith, especially in the context that you have high level of urgency, and that urgency may not always be mirrored by a partner who maybe doesn't move at the same pace?
Yeah, no, spot on. For me, I think it was, I generally like challenges, and it was big enough of a challenge that, and I felt it was possible because there was a drive, like that's a bit bigger than what we were doing, right? So I felt that there could be a good timing to push and be that enabler that brings it, that ties it all together.
Yeah.
Because we started interacting with banks, right, with the regulators, with the financial center, and all of them seemed to want to do something. Okay. So we felt like you needed a bit of that. And I started thinking, if we go through this also competitively, eventually my mindset became the more hurdles were arising, I was kind of happy, because I'm like, okay, someone else is going to have to go through this. And this is a huge turnoff for a lot of people, that if we go through it, that's going to be an edge on its own. And eventually when we got licensed, typically getting licensed, at least for me, wasn't that much. It's a milestone. It's not a celebration.
Yeah.
But Sarwa, when we got licensed, there was a lot of press actually around it.
Yeah.
And it tells you how unusual it is. And that was just another signal around how early it is, early days for a fintech, because you're celebrating just starting.
Yeah. Yeah. What have you celebrated over the course of Sarwa's life? It's a trick question, because I imagine most entrepreneurs just get through the milestone and move to the next one.
We barely, I'm honestly guilty of that. So I can't think of a proper one. We did get better at celebrating the year end, to be fair.
Okay.
So we host our Christmas party, or year end party. But barely, not enough, honestly. still going at it.
And a lot of when you talk, a lot of the things you talk about seem to be things that are bigger than just you, or bigger than what many would perceive as kind of the immediate goal. Let me elaborate what I'm saying. So when you talk about Sarwa, you said you want to build a business that's going to help people. When you talk about going through the challenge of the IFC, you talked about paving the path for other people. So it seems like a lot of what drives you is this kind of building for other people. I think building, creating, simplifying, making something that's unfair or expensive easier. And especially in finance, I was exposed to the passive industry, and I'll explain what that is, at a very young age, where my first job, we were 4 people managing $80 billion, and our performance in equities was amazing, and it outperformed a lot of our peers that were constantly trying to pick stocks and were managing much more. And that inconsistency really marked me, because I didn't understand how come
there was more money being poured into suboptimal ways of investing. And I realized a lot of people didn't know that or had access to even to the tools that that a lot of people with money have. So I really like definitely that idea of democratizing it, because there's just so much misinformation around investing that once you've found a method that works, it just removes a big stress, and the feedback you get actually from customers really energizes you on a frequent basis. That says, wow, I used to look at trading and I lost so much money, and now I have a proven way for the rest of my life to follow. So that's a really big, like every time we do an event, and we still do them today, I love doing them, where you just get a lot of validation from customers that appreciate your product and tell you this has changed like my financial life, and we all know how much that can lead to a source of stress or the opposite.
But it seems to a certain extent those kinds of things are as big or a bigger motivation than the potential upside of building Sarwa and to the potential financial upside of being successful with Sarwa. And that's my point, that it seems like you're much more driven by the people impact of what you're doing with Sarwa and the impact on society. It seems like you're equally or more driven by that than, hey, I can potentially at some point exit Sarwa and have a big financial outcome.
Yeah, I would say that. There's so many elements. There obviously all of them are important, but the freedom also that comes with building your own company and working on a problem that you enjoy working and solving, a lot of things start to add up, because especially in the journey you realize it's not going to be the 2 to 3 year journey that a lot of us think we're
when you first jump into it, you're like, in 4 years, and I think we had to believe that, because otherwise if we thought it was a 10-15 year slog.
Of course. Yeah, and that's I give that credit to a friend called Rami. He started businesses when he was really young. Yeah. And he started 3 businesses. And after his third, I asked him, like, what is the main learning from having to start again and not working out? He told me, honestly, it's liking the idea. I realized that I would get super excited in the beginning. I would start something, and then after a while I lose the momentum and the interest in solving that problem. So whatever you work on next, make sure that you can work on that for a long time and be excited about it.
That's good advice. So to a certain extent, you said that you realized you're never ready to start, and you jump in and you're going to figure it out along the way as you go. You started at a relatively young age. How did you have the confidence to say, I'm going to execute on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, even today? How do you find the confidence to say, this makes sense, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going?
I have no idea.
You probably, based on the way your face looks, is like, I've never even thought of this question, which is to a certain extent somewhat telling, because it sounds like it's just kind of, it's there. You don't overthink it.
Yeah, just honestly, I remember in consulting, I would be sometimes, like, I would often be really impressed by my colleagues. And I remember there was one day one partner really did a fantastic job, and after the client left and everything, I was telling him, can you walk me through how you got to that? And his answer was like, I'm just improvising just as much as you, so my guess is as good as you towards this task. Do you want to take a first pass at it? So that I think consulting really forms you in a certain way also. You're just often thrown into a client situation where you're supposedly the expert, but you're figuring it out on the fly. Yeah. Right? A lot of these consultants, most projects, I believe they're solving this problem for the first time. Very rarely have I seen projects where you really solve the same exact thing before. So I think it's this programming to, as we were saying, to get comfortable with a new situation, and that confidence. Once you've done, I guess back to my mom, she always says whenever I get a bad grade, she used to say, Johnny, what was it? Keep walking. Johnny Walker.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is, now that I think about it, super random as a whiskey brand, but you just roll with the punches and continue. But you also have enough wins that you have confidence that in the past you were able to get a good grade or to perform well, that it's still in you.
So I mean, the to a large extent, what you decided to start was first of its kind in the region.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the hurdles, challenges you had to kind of continue to overcome once you became licensed?
Yeah, I would say we have a difficult job to convince people to give us their life savings, right? So building trust is something that we really focused on in the early days, to build the platform in the best ways possible that will inspire trust. So, and we typically in our business, trust comes purely from being old. I mean, we're an old bank. We've been in business for hundreds of years, 100 years.
Yeah.
So in our ways, we're very young, so we have to think about it in a very different way. So transparency, we started breaking it down and understanding what are the ways that we can do that. So transparency, making sure the partners or the brokers we work with are very trustworthy. And that on its own was actually quite a challenge, because when we would talk to banks or brokerages in the US to tell them we're a new startup in Dubai that wants to work with them, some of them wouldn't return our messages or our calls. So that was quite a challenge to know who do you build on top of as an investment platform, because you're not going to build it. What Sarwa is today took time through licenses and many iterations before we got here. Before we had to rely on someone else's brand, which was Interactive Brokers, to say, hey, your money's safe with them, but we're going to help you optimize it and advise on it. So that was a bit of a challenge, and it still is in a lot of ways, to also educate people on investing. We've learned it's really driven by psychology, and we were not really taught how to manage money or how to invest in school. So each one has their own path. They come with their own stories or baggage, or sometimes zero knowledge. So you have to just either add a lot of knowledge or remove some of the things they've learned, so that you can improve their financial performance.
And if there was things you wished were baseline understanding around investing, right? So something every kid should learn in school. What are the foundational principles?
First of all, you have to do it, because if you're not investing, your money is losing to inflation. So I would explain the Big Mac index and just show that the price of a Big Mac increases with time, and it's a proxy for basically the price of things increasing. So there's a way to eventually, money is important and you need to make money, and there's a smarter way than just working hard and relying on your income. So I would explain the concept of inflation. I would explain the concept of tools of beating inflation, generating a second stream of income through investing, and not just relying on salary and what you do. Because these are some of the themes I would touch on. Even if we look at the Forbes 400 wealthiest people and how they've generated their wealth, it's not from their income. Actually, it's from their investing. So if the purpose of investing is to make money, or if the purpose of anything as a mission is to make money, the best way to get there is through this thing called investing, and not through your income. So, and then once you explore that world of investing, you start to see how are the greats, what is the best way to do well in a consistent manner, and where do you start? So there's a lot of ways, as I'm realizing, but its importance is life-changing.
And I think to a large extent people are undereducated about financial literacy, and in this part of the world even more so. I heard a statistic, I don't know how true it is, but it was from a VC. They were saying that in the region where percent of GDP where savings are in the Middle East is less by a factor of 5x versus developed markets. So how much we actually save versus developed markets, we're pretty much 80% lower.
I could see that. We see nationality being a key driver in our behavior. So you see, for example, Indians are and still are like a big part of our top 5 nationalities, and it's very cultural because they come here and they've just gotten used to a lot. They have a saving and investing culture. Arabs were more put money under the mattress type of. If you talk to your parents or your grandparents, we're more of a saving even in a good way, but in general we haven't been exposed to retirement plans or products that make you think of starting earlier. But that's changing. I think given with it like Reddit, YouTube, there's a lot more awareness, and when you understand you can work 10 years less, you can buy a second home, and like once you understand the magnitude of how much it could change your financial picture, then you understand why you need to do it.
And so you started U3, and then today you're 50-ish.
Yeah.
Tell me about the journey of building the company.
Yeah, for us, we started similar to how we discussed like Nadine joining us. It started with also, all right, well, we're gonna need people that were advising on investing. So we had Danny, who was at UBS back then, join us. So one of the best private banks, but he was also passionate about joining and not just helping people with 10 million plus, but with a few $1,000s as well. And then we started to add, to build out a marketing team, customer support, and just think of the company more as different functions. That was the first layer, I think, and the founding team to really get it off the ground. I would say the second stage was, all right, building a leadership team so that we can have people that really own their functions, because we were going a bit crazy wearing too many hats at some point. And I think that was a really pivotal moment to getting where we are today, where it gets, once you have the leadership team figured out, a lot of things follow after that.
There's always this discussion about, do you hire the person who's going to lead the function versus hiring an individual contributor? I mean, you're taking on a lot of cost early when you hire a functional leader versus... did you guys debate those different approaches? And in retrospect, what do you think about the approach that makes sense?
There's merit to both.
Yeah,
it's very difficult. There's some people that I think will thrive and grow as fast as the company and do that, and there are others that enjoy more the earlier stage. So it depends. I think there's merit to both. I don't have honestly a clear one or the other. But in general, Sarwa, if you like, the way we've staffed has been much more like our tenure, I think, is much higher because people stick around. We've built a really good culture. So in some cases, we've brought in an external. In some areas, we've promoted as much as possible. So it really depends on the individual and on a case by case basis.
Yeah. And when you kind of think about the journey, what are some pivotal moments where you look back and you think about that decision really set us in the right direction to get to where we needed to get to? What were some of those pivots, those decisions that you look back on and like, thank God we made that decision?
Yeah, there's a few of those, and there's the opposite also.
That's the next question. If you want to start there, go ahead.
No, I'll start with the good stuff. I would say hiring in general, like something we've done really well. So these decisions, we've taken our time, and sometimes waited before. Hiring, also firing sometimes where it doesn't work out. We've acted like relatively quickly once we saw we tried to bring in someone that was a bad fit for the rest of the team, and it didn't really work out. So we acted fast in that scenario. Focus, I think, is something where we're known for, because today you have multiple products, but for the longest time we were just doing one thing, which is robo-advisory. When a lot of like when you think of venture, and a lot of the pressure you get is to get into other verticals, other markets. So our ability to just stay focused on building a brand on one product first, I think is another decision we like. And even in a B2C way, I'm not sure if you face this, but for us, we've been initially, there was a lot of push towards B2B. And we've had some investors that passed on our first round because they wanted to see a B2B angle, that then joined us later. Because our view was like, they're two different businesses. So it's not a channel. And so that's another decision that we've taken to build a brand. And I think COVID really helped us, because we did try to do B2B, but we brought in more assets in a quarter than our B2C angle really took off during the COVID pandemic. There was a lot of people that were investing and saving. So yeah, in terms of a lot of it, in terms of people, business model, going remote, something definitely I'm a big advocate of. I think it simplified a lot how we retain people, how we run the company. Yeah, these are some of them.
How do you debate the focus ideas, right? So when something comes your way, and I mean, in theory, especially when you're early in your journey or earlier, going back to the confidence conversation, I felt that as I've earned my stripes and I've done more of this, I have more conviction, more confidence in my own capability. But earlier, you're sitting down in front of an investor and they're like, this is what you should be doing. You're like, oh shit, maybe that's what I should be doing. So how do you, in the conversation of focus, in the context of focus, how did you break down, how was your thought process to break down what's the right approach, and then build a conviction that I'm going to agree to disagree?
Yeah, I took mistakes, honestly. I was really guilty of having an investor meeting and then calling Ajar or the tech team or Nadine, if it's a campaign on marketing, to be like, we need to do this because X. And I feel like initially you undervalue some of your own prioritization, and you look up to people that have millions of dollars to invest in you. But with time we've learned that we know our specific focus actually more. That's why they're investing in us in the first place. Yeah. So until that click, we were guilty of trying to go in a bunch of directions. And you also want to build a relationship, but it's with time, I think one thing that really changed our course is a book called Shape Up by the founder of Basecamp, or 37 Signals. And he has a very great content around product, which is to think certain things such as like the default of any idea is no, as opposed to, he almost says like 95% of ideas won't get selected. And these are that's a concept even that's present in hedge funds, by the way, where when you have an investment idea, I don't know if it was you or someone that told me that, but there's a hedge fund basically that has a Google form, where by the time you fill out the Google form, the majority of ideas will be dropped and people won't end up submitting them, so that you kind of go through a filtering process and educate people on like only the best ideas of the organization will make it, because it's really difficult as a product person to keep saying no all the time. So it just took awareness that initially you think you're not doing enough because you don't have the right resources, you're understaffed, but eventually you get to learn that that constraint of not being able to do all these ideas is actually a good thing, and forces to work on some of the best ideas you have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you to a huge extent, which is one of the things you learn later in the journey versus the beginning is being confident that I know my space to a big degree, more than the majority of investors I'm going to sit with, right? And to a certain extent, my view on this is most investors will try to add value by giving ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I measure the amount of value creation I give by the number of ideas I give, then if I'm not saying anything, then I'm not creating value for you, right? But it's to a certain extent dilutive and destructive to an entrepreneur to be just taking in all those ideas.
100%. And there's also there's certain ideas or advice that I've gotten that was too early.
Yeah.
So I've had, when we first started, I've had people that told me you should launch a trading platform. And we had barely gone live with our and we were so excited to have launched our robo service. And we're like, come on, how can you not see how amazing this is? What are you telling me to go into a new thing already?
Yeah.
And we ended up doing trading, and I wish I did it sooner, for sure. But we weren't just ready yet to think of a vertical expansion, because I think VCs and investors will think in a total addressable market, vertical, and you're just so in the weeds sometimes that you just want to make sure this thing works and people like it. So there's also the wrong advice at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But I'm guilty. I realize after, like, once you sit with certain founders as well, I think we're all guilty of eventually we'll start to give advice.
Yeah.
It's almost a human behavior.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the maturity aspect of, I think just life in general, not only in business, is a large part of becoming more mature is being able to listen with open ears, but then having the filters on where that advice gets allocated, right? So is it in the thanks but no thanks bucket, thanks but I need to noodle on it more, and noodle on it more, and maybe it's something for another time, but it's getting parked, not disposed. And then the other bucket is, God damn it, I wish I did this earlier. Thanks for that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like being able, it took me a long time where I was just, when someone would give me advice, for me personally, I'd almost get defensive, right? I'm like, oh man, like what's this guy saying? Like he has no idea. So it took me a while to be able to say, actually, I'm going to listen with no emotion, so I can actually listen. And then once I hear it, I put it in those buckets.
Yeah, spot on.
And then I think another part of it is the team, right? So when your team scales, your team has suggestions, ideas, complaints, whatever you want to call them, feedback. And I think the other part is, as you listen to the team, figuring out almost how big of an issue is this? Is this like an anecdote, or is it something we need to work on? And how big of an opportunity is this? Is this something where someone's just throwing out an idea, or is this person really on something that could be huge?
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I guess that's a benefit of like asking our customer experience team or customer support team, if without thinking, think fast. The top 3 things at the moment that people are asking about, and they'll start typing right away, and you won't see that long of a lag before you do that. So in parallel, sometimes we do like a roadmap, and we try to come up for our first half of the year plan. But in addition to that, it's like, what are the top 3 things that you're often asked about? And there's a survey called the Product Market Fit Survey that I really, really enjoyed working on with Robin, who leads our product team. Basically, it was, you ask your customers, you start by asking, how disappointed would you be if Sarwa no longer exists? And if you get a 40% very disappointed, then you found product market fit. That's kind of one way of making it numerical. And then what's cool is you start to, the 3 answers are very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed at all. And the approach here is to remove those that don't like you that much, because it's going to be very difficult to make them happy, but to focus on the 2 other buckets. And then they start to tell you, like for us, it was really clear that we had to open a local account for people to transfer their money instead of sending it to our brokerage, or to launch another vertical. When we asked them, who would you use if not Sarwa, their main answer was Interactive Brokers, which is a trading platform. So when all right, well, it's in our face. Like the number one answer is by a landslide is this player who's doing that. So it can help a lot just also to ask customers
100%.
certain questions.
Yeah, 100%. And have you faced any scenarios where you've disagreed with your customers? Where
Yes.
they've given you something like, I don't think they see the next evolution of this, and so or for another reason.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the anti-use case. So for example, there are some things that come up early on where it was just too small, so they would ask for local stocks, but the implication of building something like that was huge. Or sometimes they're asking for a desktop version of what we're doing and add like a lot of features to the point that it would replicate what's out there as a trading platform. So then we would alienate basically the first timers, which are 70% of our users. So however, I would say that one mistake we've made is initially when someone said, we used to say, don't pick stocks, diversify, invest in an ETF. An ETF will outperform the 90 to 95% of active investors. Why wouldn't you take it? So we used to constantly actually disagree with them. But that, in hindsight, that was a big mistake, because you can, it's one thing to educate, but no one wants to be also told what to do. And you had a bit of that, like, without saying it too negative, but you're a bit of like the naysayer or a teacher.
Yeah, some arrogance comes with it. Yeah,
there's a lot of arrogance that comes with it. So we switched to being like, okay, well, listen, we realize people are going to do it anyway, actually. So you might as well enable and give people what they want and just make it better and simpler and more cost efficient. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers it, but disagreeing, I think, is initially we thought we were onto something, but with time we realized there was like a glaring product vertical that we could have worked on earlier.
Yeah, I was talking with Mazen Howie actually on the podcast, and one of the things he said which stuck with me was product discovery is to a large extent numerical, but there's also a large extent which is, as a founder, you have to be kind of at the forefront of it, because the large extent of it is an intangible feeling, a gut feeling and it's to a certain extent art as well. So it's how do you marry the art with the data to come to something that you think, and it requires a lot of conviction. I think a lot of the best founders, I mean, if you think about the West, right, a lot of these founders were notorious for just having huge conviction around, whether it was Jeff Bezos with the Kindle, or Mark with Newsfeed. Mark, like, I know all these guys, we're on a first name basis. But, to a large extent, I think founders there's no right answer. You have to find the balance between listening, but then also being stubborn to a certain extent and having the conviction that this will work.
Yeah, it took a lot of that actually in the early days. We had so many people, especially like coming to Dubai for the first time. Our main contacts were bankers, and they were saying this will not work because there's no retail endorsement in DIFC. DIFC is for institutions and wholesale, and you can't build a retail proposition from DIFC, or you cannot do KYC, or know your customer, or account opening online. So you really need to be stubborn, because you're dealing with people that are in the industry. They've been doing this for 20 years. They're really close to the regulator. So that stuff, it's really key.
Yeah. The one thing I've adopted is I love it when people tell me it's been done like this for forever, or we've been doing this for 20 years or 10 years. I love hearing that. It's like, yes, you guys missed the window of opportunity, and you're not going to see it. So the flip side of the earlier question, which is those decisions, those pivots that didn't go quite the way you wanted them to.
Yeah, I would say the main learning, the first one was around governance and what's the role of a board compared to what's the role of the management and the people running the company. This was pre-COVID, and remote was very taboo back then. And it sat at the board level, and we ended up having like a shake-up between people that were super anti-remote and people that were remote. And ultimately, it took me time to realize the decision should have been, this is a management-related governance matter and not a board matter. But given it's, even for a lot of VCs, their first time investing or doing this, I think there was a bit of there was friction that was unnecessary, because we should have like clearly outlined what's the roles and responsibilities of each. So that's something that once you have that mindset, you can more confidently say you do have a say in this or not. And that's one of the areas I would say it's the founders should know more their like the role that some of their decisions should be playing at or not.
It's going to be one of those things that will you'll remember tonight when you're microwaving something.
Most likely.
And you go WhatsApp, like, God damn it, man, this was the thing. I'll tell you, send it to me in voice note. We'll stitch it into the audio.
Yeah, no, when you asked it earlier, like 3 ideas. Like, oh yeah, this one, that one. No, but it'll come back. It'll come back.
How long have you been doing this for now?
It's been 5 years. Yeah.
How do you keep the energy? How do you maintain the stamina to keep fighting the good fight?
I think acknowledging cycles, finding a worthy challenge. I like an environment where there's always a big challenge, and I've learned that before you know it, eventually it'll come back. And sometimes there'll be a few months where you feel like you're getting the hang of it, and before you know it, you're back there again. So I think the way to advance at the speed you're meant to advance in a venture-backed startup, it forces that stamina or that challenge to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you have to have that challenge. You have to like challenges to do this. The one thing that I'd say I've started to approach differently is I used to define challenge as getting like slapped in the face, and you have to figure out how to kind of solve through that, right? Like, oh, this is a new obstacle. We didn't think of this. Now we have to go figure out how to solve it. And then you're right. So what would happen is you'd solve that, and then you'd have like a small window of, oh, I can breathe again. And then it'd be like, oh, something new came up. We didn't see this coming. And so, but maybe it's recency bias, because we had COVID, and then we had a window where funding was quite hard. And so we had to get through that. And it's like, if I think about the last 3 major milestones we had to get through, they were just all adversarial versus. But one thing we're doing this year, I woke up and I said, God, if aliens come from the heavens and take over Earth, that's a challenge, and we'll figure out how to solve that. But what if, barring any crazy event, what is the challenge we can create for ourselves that's more opportunity focused, right? And so, I was talking to the team, after the first few days of the new year, everyone's breathing. And we said, listen, to a large extent, last year was the toughest year of kind of Bayzat's history. And so now it's about, we've built the foundation, the pedigree, the battle scars of fighting. So now there's nothing to fight per se. So how do we go out and just build on top of the foundation we have in a very, very, and set very ambitious and aggressive goals. And that becomes our new challenge.
Nice.
And so what I realized, one of our team members, she said, you guys don't stop, huh? Like we can't. And so the reason I bring that story up, I think one thing I realized along the journey, so like similar to you, first 3-4 years, I'm like, next year it's going to get better. Next year it's going to get better. Next year. And then something happened where I just like, actually, there's no better. It just is. This is what I signed up for. And so I started thinking about, okay, if this is the way it's going to be, and this is what I've chosen, then I need to adapt to thriving in this circumstance, whether it's in my relationship, right? Or whether it's on a physical level or emotional level or a mental level. And I think that's something, going back, I wish I did differently, is coming in with that realization from the get-go, that we all signed up for a marathon where you just are also sprinting the whole time, right?
Yeah. No, and it's challenging it's much easier to rely on external adversity to shape what you need to work on.
Yeah,
but eventually you're right, you have to figure it out on your own when it becomes less obvious what's the of course funding and all of these, they're big enough on its own, but eventually once you've solved the big areas of your product, you want to make sure you're spending it the best way and not on incremental things that won't be as big of a value driver.
Yeah,
I can relate a lot to that, and that's why we got excited when we had going from one product to becoming more of a personal finance app with many. Like the first reaction was like, all right. So we finally launched something that we were just getting comfortable with the current platform, and now we had to do another brokerage integration and just basically restart in a lot of ways.
Yeah. How do you balance life and work? I know that from conversations we've had on a personal level, you and I are similar in the context that we enjoy spending time with our significant other. It's time we both cherish, and so that's something you and I have in common. So I'm just interested to learn from you on what are some of the things you've put in place to keep nurturing your personal relationships while also, trying to build a business.
I think I've built a system with time that I haven't edited in a while, so it's less fresh. But I think without necessarily, like in the first few years, I was constantly thinking about or changing my way of working so that I can completely be disconnected or present at certain times from work. So, and day-to-day things like on weekends, for example, initially we would go and work through the weekend. To be fair, it helped because I was doing long distance. The first 2 years.
It helps when your significant other isn't here.
Yeah,
because then there is no work-life balance.
Exactly.
It's just work.
Exactly. And to a point where I moved actually to MENA, away from the DIFC, because I was like, all right, I'm just living and breathing the DIFC every day. But eventually, when my wife Wendy, she moved here, it was like, all right, well, that's the first time I've had to balance. I've had an easier time because she's a workaholic, to be fair, also.
So I should ask her how she balances it.
Yeah. So no, I think it's specific to each situation, and for us, like we're both driven. We're both really focusing on just building and working, and at the same time, on weekends, however, I barely work and try to completely disconnect. And during the week, I think it really depends on the week, but mornings are trying to work out as much as possible, and it eventually became part of, if I don't do it, things will start to, it'll show. It'll show. I feel like, all right, there's more anger, there's more stress, so it's a self-balancing act.
Yeah. I mean, I think to a large extent, it's like a piece of the pie, right? Mm-hmm. And if the pie is fully occupied by one thing, you just start to crumble. It's not the other things start to crumble. Like I start to crumble if I go multiple weeks without working out, or multiple weeks where I feel like I'm not spending quality time with my wife. I feel like it's not that my impact on work is greater, it's far reduced actually. Mm-hmm. So I completely agree with you. It's about finding that balancing act along the way. And I think many of us are guilty, but I think it's a necessary thing you have to go through, but guilty of not paying attention to all the different parts we need to pay attention to in life. But I think it's just one of those things you learn by trial by fire. You mess it up, then you're like, okay, I need to readjust, recalibrate.
Yeah, and there's certain people, there's also, I think it's cultural. Like I was lucky to have worked early in my first job with a great boss that had a family life. And we were doing really great work and finishing our project by 7, which in consulting is unheard of.
Yeah.
And I had maybe, I can count on one hand the number of times I've worked after that. And you actually start to realize if things run well, you're finishing on time and at 7. If things aren't going well, there's an inefficiency and a crisis. That's where you need to work longer. So I think I've just learned to appreciate that working hard is like the whole hustle culture, and working hard is not something that I was ever like too attractive. And we've built a culture around like just avoiding FaceTime and all of these things that don't lead to a better product or campaign or customer service.
Yeah. How do you manage productivity, whatever the buzzword is, right? I think there's a lot of companies that have said, okay, we tried the work from remotely, we're coming back to full office. How have you guys tried to figure out?
Yeah, I'm disappointed in how many people went back to the office, to be honest. But to each their own.
Yeah.
We were, the thing is, so Jad in a lot of ways is a digital nomad, I call him. So he moves a lot. And when we started, he was in Montreal and then Paris. So it forced a lot of working remotely as an initial stage. And Nadine used to have like a routine where she would pick up the kids around 2 to 3 and then work from home after. So organically, when we first started, we realized like Slack was the head office actually. It wasn't the DIFC. And especially in Dubai, I found it super sometimes awkward, especially in fintech, where you were forced to take an office in DIFC and you didn't want to pay DIFC rent initially. So a lot of the environment made it so that working from a co-working wasn't as attractive anyway. So remote we enjoyed like just working remotely. And a lot of our culture is around trust, accountability. So people are very are autonomous. And then COVID came along and we're like, all right, that's
the cherry on top.
Yeah, it was a cherry on top because we realized while a lot of people were talking about working from home, for us it was a breeze to go through it, especially that the stock market is on US hours. So it also helped us hire, even we have, like when people go to the US, it's great because we extended actually our support hours till 1 a.m. So we liked when people like visit the US or like, please go work, spend your summer in the US. So there's a lot of things, or if someone is a night person, we started shifting schedules because it allowed us to offer customer service from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. So we started seeing the remote opportunity as like, how can we go on offense as opposed to the general perception of it, which is productivity, right? But with all of this said, we've experimented a lot and realized like 2 times a year as like a retreat is really good to bring the team together for 2 full weeks. Ideally, I think we would do this quarterly, but you almost like refill a battery that can last you a quarter. Once you meet in person, that it works well. But the weeks where we actually meet up, we get a lot less done because we're just so used to doing our thing. But at the same time, that's the whole point is to reconnect.
I've heard you say a couple of things today. I like this idea of find your wasta. I think in the early days, and even now, I'm like we're starting in Saudi, or we started in Saudi, so I'm trying to build my network very deep. But you vocalized it in a way that I hadn't thought about it. But find your wasta. Focus on the next milestone. Don't get distracted or let the end journey be daunting. This idea of being confident that you know your space and not getting too hung up on what investors say in the early days. I like this idea of ask for quick responses from your support team. They probably have a lot of good ideas. It's been fun talking to you in front of a mic. I know we catch up every now and then over walks in the DIFC, but thanks for agreeing to do this.
Of course, it's a pleasure. It was really fun.